Afghan suicide bomber kills Kandahar police chief. The police chief of Afghanistan's southern Kandahar province has died in a suicide attack on his headquarters. Khan Muhammad Mujahid was killed and 2 other police officers were injured in the blast, officials say. A suicide bomber managed to penetrate the defenses of police headquarters by wearing a police uniform, the Afghan Interior Ministry said. Mr. Khan had survived previous attempts on his life. The police headquarters has also been targeted in the past. The suicide attacker had strapped explosives to his body, Deputy Chief Shersha told AFP news agency. He detonated himself at the gate of Kandahar police headquarters. Police Chief Khan Muhammad Mujahid has been murdered and 2 policemen have been injured. Taliban spokesman Yusuf Ahmadi said one of its members carried out the attack and gave AFP a slightly different account of events. He had disguised himself as a policeman and shot the police chief with his pistol, hugged him and then detonated himself, he said. The police headquarters in Kandahar has been the target of several attacks in the past, which had forced the authorities to review security arrangements around the complex recently. Chile to exhume former President Salvador Allende. The remains of Chile's former President Salvador Allende will be exhumed as part of an inquiry into historic rights abuses, a court has ordered. Investigators are trying to determine whether Allende killed himself or was killed by soldiers in 1973 coup that brought Augusto Pinochet to power. Allende's body was found in the presidential palace after a building had been attacked by troops and planes. Judges ruled the exhumation would take place in the second half of May. Thousands were killed, disappeared or tortured under General Pinochet's rule, which lasted until 1990. The Allende case is one of 726 alleged rights abuses that investigators are looking into. An official post-mortem report found he committed suicide using a rifle given to him by his friend Cuban leader Fidel Castro. Allende's doctor confirmed that conclusion and it was accepted by his family. But some of his supporters continue to believe he was killed by soldiers.
Signs and the first activities on the opposing forces side, usually described as the spring offensive, as a Taliban spring offensive. That's not yet the case. We do not see actually a whole lot more of attacks against the Afghan security forces or ISAF respectively. There is a very slight increase of security incidents, but nothing that would actually substantiate the description that there is a spring offensive ongoing. That's not the case.
TEPCO to compensate Japan's nuclear plant victims. The Japanese government has ordered the operator of the nuclear plant damaged by last month's quake as tsunami to pay compensation to affected families. About 48,000 families who lived within 30 kilometers of the Fukushima Daiichi plant will be eligible. The compensation is described as provisional with payouts expected to 1 million yen. That means $12,000 per family beginning on 28th April. Plant operator TEPCO is still trying to stabilize the nuclear facility. Tokyo Electric Company TEPCO is to make an urgent and speedy payment in order to compensate for the losses incurred by evacuation and orders to stay indoors, said Chief Government Spokesman Yuki Edano. The basic idea is that one household will receive 1 million yen. We think that such an amount is necessary for a provisional payment, he said. JP Morgan has estimated TEPCO may face claims up to 2 trillion yen, nearly $24 billion. BRICS meeting concludes. The greater importance of developing world in the global arena is stressed. President Jacob Zuma has cautioned Asian countries against currency devaluation. He was addressing the BOAO Forum of Asian countries in China. The president, concluding his visit to China, called for an urgent review of global financial system. Dominating the BRICS meeting was currency volatility, which affects importers and exporters. China has cost jobs in South Africa through keeping its currency weak artificially. Addressing top Asian policymakers, the President Zuma reflected on these concerns. You can't always say we are a globalized society, but when it comes to a very special national interest, you forget that. You deal with your currency, which impacts on other currencies negatively, says Zuma. The whole team, News Analysis, express our heartfelt condolences on the sudden demise of the pretty child of KS Chithra. We pray let her cope up with, recover from, and come back as fast as possible, so that the world can enjoy her newer melodies once again. We'll move on to the business world. India proposes telecom policy changes as scandals hit. India's telecom minister Kapil Sibal has proposed a slew of changes in the country's telecom policy in an attempt to streamline the industry. He said the merger and acquisition rules will be relaxed to allow consolidation in the sector. Mr. Sibal also indicated that as part of the new policy, the government will separate mobile licenses from spectrum fees. India's telecom sector was rocked by a spectrum allocation scandal last year. The country's lawmakers are currently investigating whether telecom licenses were sold at cheaper prices in order to favor some companies. An official audit claimed the government may have lost as much as $39 billion in revenues. The scandal has dented the image of the sector and also created huge political issues in the country. There have been discussions about making the licensing process and spectrum allocation more transparent. The Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, TRAI, has also recommended the service providers must be charged a higher fee for use of 2G spectrum. Welcome to the world of science. Humpback whale song spreads to other whales. Recordings of male humpback whales have shown that their haunting songs spread through the ocean to other whales. Researchers in Australia listened to the hundreds of hours of recordings gathered over more than a decade. This revealed how a specific song pattern, which originated in eastern Australia, had passed like Chinese whispers to whale populations up to 6,000 kilometers away in French Polynesia. The findings are reported in a journal, Current Biology. The research team, led by Ellen Garland from University of Queensland, say the findings show the animals transmit such cultural trends over huge distances. Within a population of all males sing the same song, Ms. Garland explained, but that song is consistently changing. So we wanted to look at the dynamics of songs throughout an ocean basin. To do this, she and her colleagues studied recordings of 775 humpback whale songs taken by scientists from the South Pacific Whale Research Consortium. Lots of different sounds make up each song, Ms. Garland explained. There are low-frequency moans, groans, and growls, then higher cries and shrieks, and all variations of ascents and descents. And in sports, Chinese Grand Prix, Vettel is fastest in Shanghai practice sessions. There may be a little bit of damage limitation in the second practice session in Shanghai on Friday as Formula One teams prepared for the Chinese Grand Prix. The first two this year and the last two last year set the fastest time more than 2 seconds ahead of the next best car and driver Lewis Hamilton at McLaren Mercedes. When I saw these times, I began thinking about the Michael Schumacher era in Formula One. One of the German dominated the series. Did I want again do any of us but with Vettel as a man? Fortunately, in the afternoon session, Hamilton was able to get within a tenth of a second of Vettel, but German still led. The picture will begin to form a little more clear afterwards, but don't hold your breath. Vettel is on a roll. And before we close today's bulletin of news analysis, let's have a recap of the main points. NATO showing strain over approach to Libya. Syria clashes at mass Damascus protest. Libya conflict, Gaddafi cluster bombing Misrata. Nigerians to choose president in Africa's biggest vote. Court grants bail to social activist Binayak Sen. Afghan suicide bomber kills Kandahar police chief. And there we end today's bulletin of news analysis. Be with us in the coming weeks too. Thank you.